Friends, good morning. Welcome to my Bible study held here in my basement during this period of isolation and the stay-at-home order. I'm Bill Hennessy. I'm the pastor at North Presbyterian Church in Williamsville, New York. And this Bible study is based on the daily lectionary readings that can be found on the PCUSA website, pcusa.org. And if you search for daily lectionary readings, you'll go right to them. Today, of course, is Friday, April 10th, 2020. It is Good Friday, the last day, um, Good Friday during Holy Week, obviously. And the passages today reflect that. One of them, in fact, I used a couple of, I think last week sometime, Psalm 22, which begins, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of the last words Jesus utters on the cross, according to the Gospels. And then another one, another of the passages for today is another psalm, out of the depths. I cry to you, O Lord, Lord, hear my voice. That another passage that I believe I looked at earlier last week or sometime. So we're hearing some of the themes repeated in these passages during the daily lectionary cycle. But I'm going to look at a couple of other passages. One is the epistle reading, which is from 1 Peter, and then the gospel reading, which is from the Gospel of John, chapter 13. And I'd just kind of like to talk a bit about Good Friday and how we understand the Passion itself. So, beginning though, first with these passages, this is, as I say, the epistle reading for today, which is from, it's from 1 Peter 1, verses 10 through 20. Concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied of the grace that was to be yours made careful search and inquiry, inquiring about the person or time that the Spirit of Christ within them indicated when it testified in advance to the sufferings destined for Christ and the subsequent glory. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves but you, in regard to the things that have now been announced to you through those who brought you good news by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. Therefore prepare your minds for action. Discipline yourselves. Set all your hope on the grace that Jesus Christ will bring you when he is revealed. Like obedient children, do not be conformed to the desires that you formerly had in ignorance. Instead, as he who called you is holy, be holy yourselves in all your conduct. For it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. If you invoke as Father the one who judges all people impartially according to their deeds, live in reverent fear during the time of your exile. You know that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your ancestors, not with perishable things like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without defect or blemish. He was destined before the foundation of the world, but was revealed at the end of the ages for your sake. And then the gospel reading, which is from the Gospel of John. It's not a very long passage at all. It's John 13, verses 36 to 38. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered, Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, Why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Very truly I tell you, before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times." Okay, so those are the 2 of the readings for today in the daily lectionary cycle. The first one is really sort of an interpretive a narration on the Passion, on the crucifixion. In the New Testament, of course, Jesus' Passion is presented as a part of each of the gospel readings, and some commentators have described certainly Mark's gospel and the others, but Mark's gospel in particular as sort of a passion story with an extended introduction. The passion story is sort of the core story of Jesus' life. I suspect that the original stories about Jesus sort of centered around that passion narrative. And that narrative has a very, very long history. Jesus' passion is, I think, an example of similar stories that are told in other faith traditions about heroes who endure hardships in their quest for deeper insight and enlightenment. If one of the best books I've ever read about this is by Joseph Campbell. It's called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So this is that book. It's a wonderful accounting of how this story, this hero narrative, kind of can be found throughout human history in all kinds of cultures. Now, it takes different forms, obviously, and it has often different nuances, but the basic claim is the same, that it's the story of a hero who goes on a quest, and in the course of that endures many, many hardships, and in order to sort of cross a barrier, to cross into a new reality, and then comes back to bring the boons of that quest to the community. Jesus' story is very much on that pattern. Now, that's not to say that that Jesus historically wasn't crucified. He was. I think there's there is that reality certainly is hard to I think to deny, that the historical person Jesus of Nazareth led some kind of movement that ended with his crucifixion. The Passion story, however, takes that crucifixion and expands it and gives it a new meaning by connecting it to prophetic passages, in particular some of the Psalms. In fact, Psalm 22 is sort of one of the sort of controlling pieces for the the way that passion is interpreted. And so you see, especially in Mark's gospel, as you read the passion narrative, you see all these direct references to Psalm 22. It's not just, my God, why have you forsaken me? But the whole thing of selling his clothes, for lots, and or casting lots for his clothes, and his being dried and needing a drink, and all that. There's a whole lot of reference to that. That became a framework for the story, for this passion story. It is a deeply symbolic and powerful metaphor for the human experience. That is, our experience of moving beyond the sort of ego-driven needs that motivate us to a deeper connection to the divine by submerging the ego and going through the experience of death. Death in the sense of losing our self-centered orientation to become more centered in the divine presence, and then sharing that knowledge with the community. Here's the problem. The passion stories, which are these wonderful, important, symbolic stories, have been literalized by the church over its history, and as a result of that, have caused untold violence, especially toward Jews in the world. Historically, Holy Week, for instance, it has been a time of terror for Jews in the history of the church. It is a source of, I think, a great shame for the church to have these stories that we have used to justify the violence toward Jewish people. Because in these stories, the Jewish community is identified as the cause of Jesus' death. In Matthew's gospel, you have that horrible reference where the crowd says, "His blood be upon our heads and upon our children." And the church has used that tiny little phrase as to justify persecution of Jews ever since. As I mentioned before, there is a straight line from these stories to the Holocaust. And the passion narratives, because we have literalized these and treated them as historical events, have become the source of rampant anti-Semitism in the church. And as a result, they've lost the real power they could hold, because these are stories that are transformative if we understand them metaphorically as describing the inner journey that we experience in our relationship with the divine. But because we have historicized them and literalized them, they're nothing more than just events that happened long ago and can be allowed to have no impact on our current lives, except to be a source of retribution and vindictiveness. So it's a shame. It really is, because Good Friday is the time when we should be turning inward, when we should be accompanying Jesus in this journey through death to bring us to the new life of resurrection. But instead, the church has used this abominably. And you hear hints of that a bit, even in the New Testament. How we interpret the Passion and Jesus' crucifixion really does shape our view of the world and our understanding of the faith. For instance, is Jesus' crucifixion a sacrifice made to an angry God to appease God's disappointment and anger at humanity? Is that its purpose? That's been one of the interpretations of the crucifixion. It's called substitutionary atonement, that the church has embraced, although the church has never determined that any single interpretation of the crucifixion is the only valid one, but this is one that the church has really embraced. I think because of its roots in Roman jurisprudence and this idea that if a punishment is given to someone, then there must have been a crime commensurate with that. And so our crime is our rejection of God, and so the punishment for that, which then God places on God's Son, on Jesus, is this sacrificial death. Substitutionary atonement is, I think, for a lot of folks, helpful in understanding a reason for Jesus' death. But it seems to me that a more compelling way of looking at it is that Jesus' death is the result of the way he lived. That is, the way of compassion, the way of sacrificial love. And in a world that finds compassion to be weak, and a world that is committed to maintaining certain power relationships, anyone who challenges that in a consistent way is going to be sacrificed. So and so the another way of understanding the crucifixion is this idea of Jesus as a role model. That would be Peter Abelard's understanding, as opposed to the Anselmian understanding of atonement, that Jesus is a role model who teaches us what it means to and what it costs to take on this life of compassion in the world. So there are different ways of understanding the crucifixion. and identifying only one can, I think, cut us off from some more sort of creative and fulfilling interpretations, and can also shape how we then go on to live our own faith and regard others. Even though oddly the this theory of substitutionary atonement is so popular, still the church blames a group of people for what the church claims was a necessary sacrifice. It just makes no sense at all. I mean, in that context, it seems to me anti-Semitism just makes no sense whatsoever. But looking for sort of logic and rational thinking when it comes to religious piety, it may not always be such a good idea because it's kind of hard to find at times. So the story of Jesus' crucifixion, Jesus' passion, is central to our faith, but it's not simple. It's not something that we can define easily and then be done with. We have to, I think, be constantly meditating on it and moving more deeply into it in order to better let it shape us and help us to become more deeply attached to the life of Jesus. That passage in John, I think, to a certain degree, describes us all. We're Peter says to Jesus, I'll go anywhere with you. I have no doubts about my commitment. And Jesus says, well, actually, you won't. This is a harder path than you know. And when push comes to shove, you will deny me. We're all in that position, I think. We are always in danger of denying Jesus, perhaps especially when we interpret his death in ways that lead to violence and vindictiveness, when we look for someone to blame, rather than taking on that death within ourselves and allowing it to shape us and to lead us into a deeper attachment and connection with the divine, who is always calling us beyond ourselves to let go of the ego that drives us and find our true identity in the divine, in the presence of God. I hope you will have a satisfying and meaningful Easter celebration this year, in this time of isolation and separation. It's hard, I know, to feel connected in the ways that that we should be, that we have been taught to be. So I hope you're able to find meaning through this experience of the Easter season. There is a recording available for Good Friday on YouTube. On this channel, in the worship playlist, you will find the Good Friday recording that I was a part of, and several folks from our congregation helped to read the Stations of the Cross. Again, depiction of that hero's journey that Jesus takes on, and excuse me, and also you can find a link to the Saturday Easter Vigil that has been prepared by the Kenmore, Tonawanda, and Maryvale churches. They call themselves Kentonvale, I believe. The three congregations, sister congregations, who have joined their resources to provide worship during this period. And they have a Facebook page which you could access to see that. And then for Sunday, there is a worship service that was recorded at the North Presbyterian Sanctuary by me, and along with a recording of a Hallelujah chorus that was made during a worship, the end of an Easter service several years ago, and a montage of some pictures from the congregation for spring, which I hope you'll take some time this weekend to enjoy all of that and continue in your own journey to the cross and beyond the cross to resurrection. I will be with you again on Monday, April 13th. Until then, friends, be at peace, be safe, and be well.